So I'm going to jump in and get us started because we have so much to get through today, and we have such incredible panelists. I want to make sure you have as much time with them as possible. So good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's briefing, Sustainable Energy for All, Building Clean Energy, Good Green Jobs, and Public Ownership with Direct Pay, presented by the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. My name is Jessica Juarez-Scruggs, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm joining you from occupied Duwamish lands in Seattle, Washington. I'm the Director of Training and Capacity Building here at the CPC Center, and I'm so grateful that you have all joined us today. As we get started, we would love it for everyone to introduce themselves in the chat. We'd love for you to share your name, your pronouns, any affiliation, organization that you want to share, and where you're joining us from. I also have a couple of housekeeping notes that I want to just get out of the way before we jump in. First, we're going to be digging deep into a policy discussion around direct pay or elective pay today, but we will not be engaging in electoral or partisan conversations during this session. Secondly, we've enabled automatic closed captioning. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you go to the bottom of the screen and you click on the little dots and then live transcript, you should be you can be enabled for closed captioning. It is AI, so it's often imperfect, and we will be adding improved captions before we send out the video to you later this week. Also, if you see your on-screen name is event participant, you might want to rename yourself. And it also may mean that you are not registered. You may have clicked a live link to this instead of registering in advance. I encourage you to register in advance because that means you'll get all the great materials we'll be talking about today. So if you haven't, my colleague Heejin is going to put a link in the chat. Make sure that you sign up using that link so that you can get all the great materials we talk about today. And then lastly, we have some truly world-class experts with us today who are going to be haunting our chat Q&A. I really want to encourage you to ask questions of the incredible panel throughout the event. Instead of dropping them in the chat, you want to drop your questions into the Q&A box that you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. We have some incredible technical assistance experts who are here to help answer those questions. You'll see answers from Advait Arun from the Center for Public Enterprise, Taylor Craner from the Tax Law Center at NYU Law, and Jillian Blanchard from Lawyers for Good Governance. And you'll hear more about them in a minute. But they are here to help answer as many detailed questions as we can get to in one webinar. So we're really grateful for them. Today's webinar is going to be a discussion of the direct pay provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. These are the provisions of the IRA that have flown under the radar, but have the power to be transformative for our communities. For the first time ever, the federal government will give tax-free cash directly to tax-exempt entities, like many of you here, for renewable energy projects. The credits operate like a refund and can cover up to 70% of the project in some cases. We'll get into more about what that means as we as we go on. After our panel discussion, we'll actually go into a little bit more depth. But you can also check out the Center for Public Enterprise's new financial model that allows you to calculate the amount of direct payment that your project could receive. Advait's going to drop the link in the chat, and we'll also share it in the follow-up. So it's really a great tool, and I encourage you to check it out. The possibilities are really endless, and we'll dig into all of that later. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, who will tell you more about the rest of our panel. Rhiana Gunn-Wright is the director of Climate Policy Program at the Roosevelt Institute, and she's a legend. Her longtime leadership in the fight to solve the climate crisis has focused on building large-scale economic transformation that catalyzes just and rapid responses. Prior to joining Roosevelt, Rhiana was the policy director for New Consensus, charged with developing and promoting the Green New Deal, which was ultimately introduced as a resolution by Representative Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Markey from Massachusetts. She was the policy director for Abdul El-Said's 2018 Michigan gubernatorial campaign, a 2013 Rhodes Scholar. Rhiana has also worked as policy analyst for the Detroit Health Department, acted as the Miriam K. Chamberlain Fellow for Women in Public Policy at the Institute for Women's Policy Research, and served as on the policy team of former First Lady Michelle Obama. We are so, so grateful that she's joined us today. And she's going to moderate our panel. Thank you so much. We're honored to have you. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jessica. So really excited to be here. Direct pay is one of my favorite provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. If you needed to know how much of a nerd I am, that I have favorite provisions. But anyway, I think this is such a crucial time for us to be here. Obviously, the climate crisis isn't just coming, it's here. Just we've already seen fires in Hawaii and Canada, unrelenting droughts in the Southwest, devastating floods, unprecedented storms, Hurricane Lee, deadly heat waves, and we just don't have time to waste. Black and Indigenous communities have been fighting to take action on systemic environmental racism and the climate crisis and the connection between the two for decades, and too long, their voices have been disregarded, shut out. And not considered, even when we are talking about landmark legislation. And so last year, Congress and the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest energy bill we've passed since electrification and the Great Depression. But like we said, again, the voices of Black and Indigenous leaders were shut out of some of those negotiations. And the final bill, if not implemented well, is poised to potentially deepen systemic oppression and institutional racism. So, I mean, I recently put out an essay about it, but we have like tax credits for individual homeowners that are non-refundable, which means that they limit access to low-income households. We have renters largely being shut out of that because of split incentives. And of course, in exchange for his support for the bill, Senator Manchin was able to get support for things like the Mountain Valley Pipeline, that folks have been fighting for years. But that doesn't mean that there aren't important opportunities at the heart of this bill, and that if done correctly, this bill cannot push forward a just energy transition that is in fact reparative, empowering, and enriching in so many senses for everyone, particularly Black and Indigenous communities. But it's up to us as a movement to seize the moment and work together to make that the reality. And that's why I'm so excited to be here, because the direct pay provision is one of the crucial opportunities at the heart of the IRA. It's a provision that makes direct tax-free funding available to state and local governments, tribal governments, houses of worship, school districts, public utilities, rural electric co-ops, and nonprofits for the first time. And I'll just emphasize that that array of organizations being eligible for this sort of funding is unprecedented and such a step in the right direction. Um, um, so direct pay credits can practically be a bottomless source of funding for getting good family sustaining union jobs into our communities and building energy that's sustainable and keeps the air we breathe clean, and also that allows frontline communities to be involved in the energy transition in a way that they have really wanted to be, which is having renewable energy projects there, as opposed to just fossil fuel projects. So that's what our panel is going to discuss today: what the opportunity is with direct pay, and how do we ensure it helps dismantle systemic oppression, help build a just transition, and not just hand the benefits of the new energy economy over to the same people and corporations who have benefited from extraction. So with that, I'm going to stop my intro and instead turn to introducing each of our incredible panelists and experts. And then we're going to dive into our conversation, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for your questions. And remember that you can drop your questions into the Q&A box as we go, and we'll get to as many as we can. And that there are experts, I'll introduce them in the chat, who will be responding to your questions in real time them as fast as they can and trying to get to as many of them as they can. So let's turn to our panelists first. So first, I'm delighted to welcome Vice President Princess Moss, elementary school music teacher from Louisa County, Virginia, and Vice President of the National Education Association, the nation's largest professional organization. Vice President Moss is a respected, unwavering champion of children in public education. As the daughter of two school bus drivers who instilled within her the core beliefs of courage, honesty, respect, and the value of getting a good education, she has in turn dedicated her career to bringing new educators into the profession and being a staunch ally to students, families, and educators who have been historically marginalized. Her service includes serving as the past president of the 62,000 member Virginia Education Association and a member of Virginia's P through 16 Education Council. Next, we have Greg Akerman, who serves as the North Virginia Director for the Building Trades Council. With experience in political campaigns and legislative advocacy, Greg oversees the building trades, political and government affairs programs for Northern Virginia and works closely with union construction affiliates to pursue favorable legislation and work opportunities. In his current role, Greg will continue to help affiliates of the building trades grow and fight wage theft in the construction industry. And our last panelist is Katie Thomas. Katie Thomas brings a decade of experience working on energy and environmental policy and legislation, having most recently served as staff director for the U.S. House of Representatives Oversight Subcommittee on the Environment under Representative Ro Khanna. Katie has also worked for Senator Bernie Sanders, and before that as an associate attorney advising electric utilities, states, and tribes. And once again, I want to introduce and thank our technical experts who are here to help answer all of your questions in the Q&A box. And during our Q&A session, we're so grateful for their support and expertise and all of the incredible work they're doing to support eligible entities in receiving direct pay credits. So our technical experts include Advait Arun, who is an energy policy associate from the Center for Public Enterprise. He's experienced in evaluating strategies for mobilizing public and private finance towards the green transition. We have Jillian Blanchard, who is an energy and regulatory attorney and directs Lawyers for Good Government's Climate Change and Environmental Justice Program, where she works with a nationwide network of lawyers to provide legal guidance to cities, states, and nonprofit partners on the Inflation Reduction Act, including use of elective pay and the bipartisan infrastructure law to implement decarbonization and climate equity projects. Then we have Taylor Craner, who is an attorney advisor for the Climate Tax Project at the Tax Law Center at NYU Law, where she currently focuses on the implementation of the climate tax provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, of which direct pay is one. So really excited to have them here. And also really excited for you all. It's such a unique opportunity to get technical assistance in real time. So please take advantage of that. It's free. It's really free. So make sure to chat them and use the Q&A box. So we're going to now turn to the panel discussion. And I want to start with Vice President Moss. Oh, so excited to meet you. It's really such an honor. Love the NEA.
Thank you.
So you have dedicated your life to education and lifting up the voices of students, their families, and their educators. Some people may be surprised to see you on a call about climate justice and energy policy. Why are the Inflation Reduction Act and its renewable energy programs like direct pay important for educators and schools?
Thank you so much. And I also want to thank the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center for throwing the spotlight on this very important new piece of legislation. I must also thank the Biden-Harris administration because their tireless work on the Inflation Reduction Act and the direct pay provisions we are highlighting today are proof of their ongoing commitment to students, educators, and all workers. And to your question, Combating climate change requires collective action from many sectors, and that certainly includes education. We know that our young people care deeply about our climate and our environment. With 100,000 public schools scattered across this nation, their concerns can help us make each public school a model for sustainability and inspire each of our nation's public school students to advocate for an eco-friendly future where each student lives in a healthy zip code, where each student awakens in a home powered by clean energy, where each student travels to school in an electric car or bus, and where each student learns in a modernized classroom with clean air and water. In this future, every student learns the science of climate change and how to adapt to a warming planet. And every student is empowered to make meaningful changes in their community. You know, you mentioned the wildfires, and I have to say the increase in the wildfires, the floods, the extreme heat, and the recent changing rain patterns make it clear that climate change has already arrived. Our Black, Brown, and Indigenous and marginalized communities feel this change the most. And as we continue the work to achieve the racial and social justice that will lower the barriers to all learning that these students must overcome, we must also use the public education system to create environmental justice. Join me in imagining this future. 100,000 public school buildings, all running on renewable energy, all with healthy air and water, all with insulated roofs and windows, all 100,000 public school buildings ready to adapt to local climate impacts. Our K through 12 public schools occupy a collective 2 million acres of land. In our imagined future, each school includes a sustainable schoolyard that is a safe place to play and learn and helps to reduce community heat and flooding and includes a green space intended for community use. You know, nearly 500,000 school buses transport students to public schools. In our imagined future, the nation's largest mass transit fleet will run on clean energy. Our public schools serve more than 7 billion meals every year. We can build a future that allows each of those meals to come from locally grown healthy food and diverts or composts food waste. To the National Education Association, it is absolutely clear that climate concerns are fundamental education concerns, and we are thankful that the IRA and the direct pay provisions will be able to directly help our members and our country's students. So thank you for that question.
And thank you for that answer. So Katie, I want to ask you a similar question. Many people, myself included, are worried that some of the structural racism that is embedded in the IRA, and in part that came from sort of some of the pre-existing programs that were continued in the IRA, will exclude Black and Indigenous communities from the benefits of a green transition, or at the very least, leave them behind and make sure that they're not sort of first movers. I know that's part of why you chose to focus on the direct pay provisions. So what does direct pay mean to you for our movement, and why is it important that we organize around this unique opportunity?
Thank you, Rhiana. And first of all, let me thank you for being here with us today. We're really, truly honored to have you moderate. I know it's been a very busy day for you, so we're extremely grateful for your time. And for all of our panelists and technical experts, thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful. I think my answer is going to be all about solidarity. And so I'll start with the fact that I am wearing United Auto Workers red today. And out in Michigan, the United Auto Workers are fighting for a fair contract against, some corporate giants who would otherwise just take this wealth for themselves. Those UAW, those auto workers, are actually today themselves standing in solidarity with Blue Cross Blue Shield workers in Michigan. So whether it's the writers, the teachers, the Teamsters who just got an incredible contract with UPS, I think this answer should remain in solidarity with our workers and with our union movement. But to your point in your question where you say why we want to focus on direct pay, I think we should be very concerned that business as usual will seek to extend and entrench white supremacy and structural racism. That is how our system is set up. So the only way that this direct pay program can advance equity and can work to dismantle systems of oppression is when we do so purposefully. It will not happen by accident. It will not happen naturally. So we have to choose to invest in educational resources and technical assistance and all of our collective efforts, to Vice President Princess Moss's point, of working together to ensure that this funding ends up in the communities that have long deserved it the absolute most. And thank you mentioned for Rhiana for your recent article that really called us to come to recognize what our moral obligation is in this moment. And I have faith that we will all rise to that challenge. So thank you for that question.
Of course. And thank you for your hair. Fantastic. So good. Going to move on. So back to you, Vice President Moss. As we know, the way policy gets implemented matters a great deal. As we work to ensure that schools implement direct pay, what are you and the NEA watching to make sure that the direct pay opportunity really and truly serves students, educators, and their communities?
Thank you, Rhiana. And I think the answer here is pretty simple. The direct pay provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act will help to bring that imagined future into reality. But the financial resources that are needed to build that future won't magically appear. Schools and school districts must make their own plans for what to do and for what they need. And then they must submit the application. That means communities, parents, activists, PTAs, and education associations nationwide must go to their schools, their districts, and school boards and make sure they get to work. We want to see as many schools and districts applying for these projects as possible. Every community can have its own meetings and discuss their own priorities about what they need. Maybe they want to install solar panels or geothermal heat pumps, or maybe they want to run an unused part of the parking lot. Maybe they want to turn that into a garden, or maybe they can electrify the whole bus fleet, or just a few buses on the longest routes. There are countless concrete ways to build a more sustainable education system and future for our kids.
Thank you, Vice President Moss. I'm so glad you're out there fighting for our kids.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're all in this together.
Yeah, and our educators. So going to turn to you, Greg. Greg, you represent some of the thousands of working people who will build the energy infrastructure imagined under direct pay. The IRA contains some critical protections for working people to ensure that these green jobs are good, but we can and must also go further. Can you talk about the worker protections under direct pay? And can you also talk about what we need on top of those protections to ensure these new jobs are good, family-sustaining union jobs that are available in every community?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And I know we really appreciate this forum to get to evangelize direct pay and the Inflation Reduction Act and the opportunities that it's going to provide for working people. So just to go over initially what the what the actual law says and how it relates to to construction workers. This is really innovative. The several of the tax credits that are available under the IRA, including those that are available under the direct pay provisions, include a requirement that all workers be paid a prevailing rate, similar to what would be the case under a federally funded project, or in the case of many states, also a state-funded project. And that's going to ensure that workers are paid a fair family sustaining wage that corresponds with the average wage in their particular region. That's not always the case with tax credits that get handed down from public bodies. So that's incredibly important. The other requirement that all contractors and subcontractors have to comply with in order to allow it.
Uh-oh, did Greg freeze for you all too? Okay, well, we'll come back to Greg. Greg, good luck. And let's move to
Tax
the
claimant
next.
to.
Oh no, Greg, you froze for a bit, I think in the middle of your answer. So if you just want to rewind to about probably a paragraph before and start there.
Can y'all hear me okay? I'm sorry.
Now you're good.
Okay, I apologize for that. We also need to work on broadband.
Yes.
So I guess I think I was talking about the apprenticeship requirements under the IRA. In addition, before that, okay.
Yeah, stopped at like prevailing wage. It was where we got you frozen.
There is a requirement that contractors pay prevailing wage under the IRA, and that applies to all subcontractors and contractors that are performing the related work. And that's really important because it ensures that all the workers on the construction project are getting paid wages that are applicable to what the average family sustaining wages in that area for that particular classification of work. And there's also a requirement that all contractors and subcontractors are participants in federally or state registered apprenticeship programs, which ensures that they're making those necessary investments in the next generation of our workforce. And they're providing opportunities for folks who are especially underrepresented in construction to get their first job in construction and then be able to make more money and have more earning potential on their next job. I can speak for our unions. We spend about $60 million of our own funding just in this region on our free Earn As You Learn apprenticeship programs. And they're really opportunities for people to enter the middle class and have a good union job with strong protections. And what the IRA does and what all the direct pay tax credits do is they set the table for contractors that make those investments to be able to be competitive and not get underbid by competition that doesn't make those investments. But the important thing, I think, is that a lot of the times, even when we see similar types of requirements in other areas of the law, we still see a lot of non-compliance in the construction industry. I'm in Prince George's County, Maryland, right now, where they're building several public schools and under a P3 model, and we've seen several workers, dozens of workers, come forward publicly saying not only were they not paid prevailing wage, not only were they not participants in registered apprenticeship programs, but they also weren't getting paid according to the FLSA, and they were getting misclassified and cheated, and that's incredibly common in the construction industry. And so the onus is on public bodies and those that are taking advantage of direct paid to make sure that they are hiring contractors that have a good record, that don't have a history of wage theft, and that they're working with the building trades unions to ensure that the workers have the ability to enter into high quality registered apprenticeship programs. And implementation, I think, as we'll discuss today, is really the name of the game.
Thank you, Greg. And thank you for taking the time to repeat all that. And thank you for the work you do. We love a union. So next question, and this is for the entire panel. Black and Brown communities, Indigenous communities, low-income communities, communities with disabilities, and other communities facing systemic oppression have borne the brunt of pollution and exploitation for centuries in our current economy. How do we ensure that direct pay implementation helps build racial, economic, worker, and climate justice for the communities that need it the most? I think you all can answer in any order that you would like.
Well, I'm happy to take a whack at it, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Hey. Well, first I'll say that the quest for climate justice overlaps with our quest for education justice.
Mhm.
You know as well as I do that communities of color, Indigenous communities, and under-resourced communities are disproportionately impacted by the negative consequences of climate change. So it is truly imperative that we prioritize equity for these communities in our efforts around direct pay so that we can ensure that students from historically marginalized communities can experience the health, learning, social, and economic benefits of the transition to a clean economy and sustainable future.
Awesome. That makes total sense.
Thank you.
Greg or Katie, do either of you want to weigh in?
I'd love to weigh in.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so I think our biggest concern with the implementation of the IRA is that it won't capture some of the pockets of poverty and areas in our society that are most affected by income inequality, and that's where I think our call to action really has been over the last several months as we've been learning more about direct pay provisions. It's so important that public bodies start to put the frameworks around implementation of the IRA utilizing direct pay provisions early so that we can start to plan to do outreach and ensure that we're providing all the resources for entry into these highly skilled, these jobs requiring, certain workplace skills. We need to be taking those steps early. On the one hand, if you don't prepare, contractors may decide to set up, we call phony apprenticeship programs that on paper look good, but they don't provide meaningful work opportunities. And they may, in many cases, decide to not pay the prevailing wages as is required by the law, and hope that given the difficulty enforcing some of these.
Oh no, did Greg freeze again for other folks?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so let's move to you, Katie, and we'll go back to Greg.
These provisions.
Oh, Greg, you froze a little bit. It was around fake apprenticeship programs, which intriguing.
Maybe try without.
I apologize. Can y'all hear me okay now? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things we see with apprenticeship requirements elsewhere, kind of within our code, is that it leads to the creation of apprenticeship programs that don't necessarily meet the spirit with which they're intended. And so it's really important that public bodies start to make investments and start to make partnerships with apprenticeship programs that have a strong background within their communities, and that create meaningful opportunities to increase earning potential throughout the course of their on-the-job training. And that really has to be done through direct partnerships with building trades unions, and often through the framework of project labor agreements. Given the opportunities that the tax credits provide, we think it's really important to be able to create these partnerships early so that our unions can start to reach into the communities that need opportunities and those that have been most historically affected by the effects of climate change, and start to set up pre-apprenticeship programs that offer underrepresented groups an opportunity to get the important skills that they need before they enter an apprenticeship program. But all these things have to be done early and in preparation for, you know, these really generous tax credits. Otherwise, we kind of run the risk of both not experiencing its full effects and potentially not being able to take advantage of the full extent of the tax credit.
And I'm going to be very quick in my answer, Rhiana, if you don't mind, in saying that
Mhm.
I'm about to give a presentation about direct pay. Now that we've gotten you all excited, I'm going to tell you exactly how it works. But the one thing I would encourage eligible entities who might be on this call, so if you're a library, if you're from a town, if you're from a school, if you're from a union yourself, what we're going to try to get, what the message we want you all to think through today is to imagine big, to be very creative about what this opportunity could mean in your community, and that Congress and the federal government have set the floor for what this could be. But if communities work together, and if the communities demand union representation, then we can ensure that there are even better circumstances surrounding this entire program. And I feel like the ceiling doesn't exist. We can continue to work as hard as we possibly can to drive investments into our communities that are going to make long-term changes in building family generational wealth.
Awesome. I'm really excited for that presentation. So please, if you can, stick around because it's going to be really informative and really helpful. So the last question, again, for the entire panel. We have eligible entities, advocates, and organizers from across the country on this call. And I think it's clear that we are going to need all of us if we're going to make the promise of direct pay real. So what do all of us need to do in terms of organizing our communities to make it happen? Do we want to switch up the order? Katie, do you want to go first?
I'm just going to let you know that the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center has a toolkit for organizers and activists for them to use to talk to their communities about direct pay. How about I go to Greg?
Perfect.
Thank you. And I'm gonna keep this short before my connection goes out. But I will just say it's so important to you know, as public bodies are considering taking advantage of these credits, to start working with unions and to start working with nonprofits in their region, and also, you know, their local teacher unions and their and the CTE programs in their schools, to think about pathways into these into apprenticeship programs. So that by the time the work starts, we're targeting the communities that we really want to, in order to get these good paying jobs. But all of the factors really need to come in place in order to do that. And so that's why it's so important for public bodies early to start to commit to working with the building trades unions to start to put these frameworks in place.
Go ahead, Vice President Moss.
Okay, thank you. And I would just say that one of the most important things that we can do is to continue to get the word out. Just as Greg has said, and as I mentioned earlier, we need eligible entities to apply. Direct pay is such a unique opportunity, and we don't want it to go to waste. At the National Education Association, we will be doing the best we can to ensure schools and school districts know about these opportunities. But it is on all of us as advocates in this space to continue to ensure that we can advance sustainability and climate justice for all. And so with that, I'd like to say, Rhiana, thanks again for your facilitation of this incredible panel. I'm honored to serve on it. And thanks again to the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center and the Inflation Reduction Act. We need to get to work now. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. So sorry, I hit mute. We are going to be moving on to a presentation that really is going to walk through direct pay, what it means, and hopefully give us all sort of a common understanding of what it is, because as exciting as it is, none of these provisions are particularly easy to understand without some help from somebody. So I hope you all have the same sense of possibility and urgency that I have, that after that incredible discussion. So before we turn to questions, we're going to spend a few minutes digging into the details of direct pay with Katie. And while Katie's speaking, please feel free to share thoughts and questions in the chat or Q&A box if you prefer to remain anonymous. And just want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. It was so wonderful to hear from you. It's also so wonderful to be reminded of the really crucial role that unions were going to play in making sure that direct pay is implemented well, that it turns into all of the benefits that it can really turn into. And so very grateful that you all joined us and to have union representation here in this conversation. So you all are released. Feel free to go or to stay. But this portion, the panel portion of this is ended now. So I'm going to pass it over to Katie so she can do that presentation and encourage you all to listen in.
All right, we're so grateful. We know that we have questions in the chat, so I'll make sure that VP Moss and Greg and all of our FTA experts help us get those questions answered. If we're not able to get to them now, we absolutely will be following up with all kinds of materials, including answers to these questions. So we're so grateful that everybody is here and so engaged and asking such really, really educated and thoughtful questions. It really sounds like there's very many of us who are really thinking about this pretty seriously, and that to me is exciting. So what is direct pay? Direct pay is going to help us build jobs and sustainable publicly owned energy in local communities. And so going through the direct pay program, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal government is going to give tax-exempt entities like the local governments, so think your town, your city, your county, schools, whether they be public or privately owned nonprofits even are going to be eligible. Same with hospitals, privately owned public nonprofit hospitals are going to be eligible. Your houses of worship, think your temple, your church, and all kinds of nonprofits are going to be able to receive direct tax-free cash funding to build renewable energy projects. That's going to allow us to increase public ownership of power generation resources that will not only build public power, like energy power, but also public power. The more ownership we have of the things that sustain our own lives, the more power we have to sustain ourselves, to be resilient, and to know our community and to be a part of it. So the direct pay program is going to help us do that. We're going to help increase affordable and sustainable energy. We're going to increase high quality jobs. And as we said before, we're going to push past the floor that the Inflation Reduction Act has given us and ensure that those jobs be connected and tied to a union. And we want to ensure that this program maximizes economic and racial justice. And I think we've been talking about today a little bit about how to get that done. So next. So what is this direct pay program? What is it going to help do? So think of renewable energy generation, solar on the rooftop. You could have a parking lot that has new shaded covers that have solar on the top. You could participate in a wind turbine that is somewhere out in a rural place through a contractual agreement. You could, I mean, really, the sky's the limit with anything that you can think of for renewable energy. Ground source geothermal heat pumps. There's all kinds of opportunities available. And like we said, it's these publicly owned entities. So your town's senior center, tribes and tribal reservations are also eligible entities. And as are, like I mentioned, houses of worship. So electric vehicle charging stations are eligible for direct pay, and so are solar panels. And I mean, really, the list is pretty long and pretty exciting about all of the different technologies that are included. Next. Like we have tried to emphasize through the panel so far, business as usual would lead us down a path of not paying attention to equity And we are at an inflection point, a moral point, where we have the ability to implement the Inflation Reduction Act, but in a way that ensures that the president meets his goal of achieving 40% of these investments happening in communities that need and deserve them most. And I really don't believe that happens on accident. I think it happens when we all come together and achieve that arm in arm through showing each other solidarity and for standing for each other. And at this point, really helping spread the message, especially where we have success stories where nonprofit and tax-exempt entities have been able to build renewable energy projects, using those as case studies to allow future eligible entities to take advantage of the direct pay program. So if we center these communities, then we believe we can transfer federal funds directly into these communities. We can build disaster resilient communities, and we can create good paying local jobs like we've discussed. We think the energy future has the opportunity to be more publicly owned, more community centered than it is now. And that certainly also is improved by making our energy system more distributed than it currently is. Right now, we have our energy system is really centralized. And so it allows for these for-profit corporations to really benefit from all of the electricity generation. But if we distribute that out into lots of different places within our community, it changes the balance of power between the electric utility and our communities. So we have faith that this program could go be above and beyond just getting some solar on the roof. So what does all of this mean? Obviously, we believe that BIPOC communities have always been those hit first and worst by industrial pollution and by the climate crisis. If we cut the pollution inherent in our energy system now, we will, by displacing demand, we will have a unique chance to target those communities that need improvement in their energy system, in their air quality, in their local economy the most. And so we really believe that direct pay has the opportunity to do that, because we can ensure that these investments are being taken advantage of by providing assistance and technical assistance and education in those communities. And so, like we said, beyond just ensuring that BIPOC communities are that they are prioritized and centralized, we believe that we also will not see worker justice maximized unless we really choose to center that as well and to show solidarity with workers. There are lots of unions that are already set up to represent a lot of the workforce that is going to be connected to the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. Again, thus the UAW red that I'm wearing today. This bill is a windfall for a lot of major corporations. And so unless we really stand with workers, the business as usual would be that these corporations continue to take advantage of these subsidies without being held accountable to their workers. And that would be an unacceptable outcome. So we believe that beyond what the floor the bill creates, which is to require a prevailing wage and registered apprenticeships for these direct pay tax credits, we also believe that we can come together and maximize economic justice by ensuring that these jobs are union and that they are put together with the eligible entity through a collective bargaining agreement or project labor agreement, whatever is more appropriate in that instance. And so what's next? Obviously, a lot of you might be pretty excited to get this funding. The one thing that is slightly annoying about this funding is that it acts as a rebate. So obviously, it's going to be a challenge. And I really challenge all of us here at this table to really think about how to solve this one, how to ensure that there is upfront financing for those communities who, of course, don't have enough cash just sitting around to put solar on the roof. If they did, they might have done it already. And so we want to help connect those resources and help be the network that's going to allow for financing to happen. So the first thing that we're expecting to have happen in the application process is that the Internal Revenue Service, who you pay your taxes to, will finalize the rules and publish the form that tax exempt entities will need to fill out to let the IRS know, hey, I'm not a fraudster, I'm real, I'm going to be applying for this funding. So, you know, give me a registration number so that I can sign up for this. And so we believe that we'll know what that looks like. And of course, the second that happens, we will let all of you know as well. And then in the beginning of the year, next year, so January 24, will be the first opportunity folks have to pre-file, to do that process where you say, hi, I'm real, I'm not a fraudster. And then the IRS will give you a registration number that you will then use in April to file for your direct pay credits that will give you a refund of up to 70% in some cases for whatever project you had completed in 2023. And as long as Congress continues to allow this project to exist, it's going to continue to exist for 10 years. I think a lot of nonprofits are used to competing for grant funding that is a limited pie and having to do so in an extremely short amount of time. And this is slightly different. It's, if you are an eligible entity and you have an eligible project that you finish on time and you pre-file and then you file and you do everything correctly, you're going to get a tax credit. And so that's what makes this really unique. There's a chance that every community, every place in this country could be just inundated with renewable energy, and we could really transform our economy and really drive equity and justice in through this direct pay program. But again, only if we step up to the challenge and only if we come together to really make it happen. So that's why we're so grateful that you're here today on this panel. And just as a wrap up on the last page, I want to make sure that you know that you can always reach out to us at the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. We have our technical assistance in the chat, of course. So for the last, that'll be the last slide. For the second to last slide, I am going to be passing it back to Rhiana soon. And I have Rhiana talking to us about what we all can do to really advance direct pay on this call, as a result of this call and as a result of learning about direct pay. So we want you all to think about 3 eligible entities in your community, your kid's school, the local library, the hospital, your town, city hall. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities right around you. So to think of 3 of those, to put them in the chat and commit to ensuring to share this information with them, to make sure that they're aware that if they complete a renewable energy project this year or next, honestly, for the next 10 years, but that there are groups like us who are out here waiting to really provide assistance in making sure that these projects are built and that the federal funding is flowing into the communities as Congress intended. And so if you represent an eligible entity yourself, we want you to dream up what your organization can do and fill out the sign up link in the chat to get more information and tools. And so with that, I'm hoping that you've been putting your Q&A in the chat. I'm hoping that we're going to continue to work very closely with many of you to make sure that your renewable energy visions come true. And we're just so grateful for the time that you've given us today to really talk this one out. So with that, I'm going to pass it back. And Heejin, I don't know if you want to leave the last slide up for just a second, but I do know that we want to make sure that Rhiana helps us get to as many of the questions as we possibly can before the call is over.
Yes. So thank you for everyone who is still here. So Katie covered a lot of what I was going to say. So this is just a reminder, this is a chance to get billions or trillions of dollars to transform our community, to clean up the air we breathe, to build more resilient communities, to keep our families safe. In the midst of the climate crisis and the extreme weather that it is facilitating, and to put power in the hands of people instead of corporations, lowering energy costs and creating good green union jobs. But of course, as we said over and over, it won't happen without all of us. So just want to encourage folks to put the 3 entities into the chat, and that if you represent an eligible entity to really dream up what your organization can do and fill out the sign up link to get more information and tools. Oh, we have some people in the chat. NSU University School, JAFCO, I hope I'm saying that right. Lotus House, eligible Thousand Islands, CSD. Let's see. I think those are all so far. Oh, but I'm looking at the time and it is actually time to go to audience questions. So I think there's another poll that's about to be launched. Okay, perfect. So if you all can go ahead and fill that out, and then we're going to move on to audience questions. Perfect. Katie, can you just let me know when we're done with the poll, and then we'll go to questions.
I think we should be good to go ahead and start moving to some of the questions.
Perfect. So I want us to be able to ask and answer a few of these amazing questions we've received. So I'm going to ask if a few of the audience members want to come off mute and ask your question directly to panelists and to the technical assistance experts that are here. So please use the raise hand function if you want to come off mute and ask your question. Are we seeing? I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, there we go. We have Louise. Please, Louise, proceed.
Yes, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Louise Auerhahn with Working Partnerships. We are a community organization, part of a coalition of CBOs and local unions in the Bay Area, advocating for high road approaches to economic development. And so I'm wondering, we love the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, and we have strong pathways into our union construction jobs. But thinking about the other jobs associated with these projects, operations, supply chains, everything that's not going to be covered by prevailing wage. How can we as CBOs and local unions help push for our local governments to make sure that they're creating good jobs in all areas with this funding?
You mind if can I answer that? And
I'll
stay off camera so that hopefully my bandwidth is okay here. But Louise, I appreciate that question. I know I appreciate all the great work you all do in partnership with the local building trades unions. But we also recognize we don't want to exist on an island, and it's so important to support organizing efforts within other industries. I obviously don't speak for those other unions, but I think it's really important that employers that are taking advantage of any federal funding, whether it's IRA funding or any federal funding, have policies in place that are enforceable, that allow their workers to have a free and fair choice to join a union, so that you don't see what's happening at Amazon or Starbucks or any of these traditionally union busting employers. I know that's we've been so thrilled about how the Biden administration has been leveraging federal funding to promote better behavior within the private sector, including for example, putting labor peace language in in things like the electric bus facilities language, or grants, or airport improvement funding, or excuse me, some of the airport terminal programs. So it'll be important that anytime there's any kind of like economic lever that a public body has, that they ensure that any private entity receiving that funding recognizes recognizes their employees' right to join a union and not have to face union busting tactics.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to weigh in? Sure. So our next question. So we've gotten a bunch of questions on financing. So can our panel address how that could work?
Hey, Jillian, why don't you talk about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund?
Thanks for the softball, Katie. Hi, everyone. Yeah, that is a great question. And it's something that everyone, of course, is thinking about. It sounds great to get money back, but if it's going to take 2 years, what do I do? How do I build a project? What are you talking about? So there are a lot of upfront financing opportunities. There's potentially forgivable loans, but there's loans as part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. There's $27 billion that's come down through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. $7 billion has already been released. There is an existing notice of funding opportunity that is out. So I encourage folks to look at your particular state because many states applied for that funding. And that funding is supposed to be used to assist and advance disadvantaged communities. So I recommend you look, and I'll look up the link and put it in the chat for folks, but look up whether your state has already applied and is planning on doing an application, because right now they're working on who their partners will be for financing. So if you have a project and if you're thinking of one, I encourage you to reach out to the state agency that has applied for this financing, because they are going to need to identify communities and frontline organizations like yourselves to partner with. And they're all scrambling to figure out who that's going to be. So it could be you, and it's one way to get financing. There's also a lot of grants available in a variety of different programs from EPA, from DOE. There is something called the Climate Portal, which I can share in the chat too, where you can look for funding opportunities for your types of projects, just to get that upfront funding. And then one other thing I want to add, and then I'll pass it to Katie, is keep in mind, you can get the upfront funding if it comes in the form of a grant that you don't have to pay back. Then you are still eligible for direct pay, but you'll only get the amount that you have left over. You won't be refunded any more than your total project cost. That's in the rules. That's a special rule in the elective pay, which makes sense. You can't make money off of it, but you can be fully paid back.
Thank you, Jillian. And I had a question. If a state has an existing green bank, can folks apply for financing from entities like that?
Absolutely. In fact, those green banks and those entities considering forming green banks, or maybe they already have, are the ones who have filed for that application for the Solar for All Greenhouse Gas Fund program that's out now. So that's why I was saying, take a look at what NOIs are out there, because they're typically the green banks that exist now that are trying to get that funding, and it'll tell you exactly which agency you need to go to talk to about getting that financing. So I'm going to look for that link now, put it in the chat.
Okay. And financing what's the role of CDFIs in financing?
So
too, for some of these.
Yeah, I'll do this one, and then others feel free to join in. But CDFIs are those nonprofits that are basically set up to give out those loans. So there are nonprofits. A lot of times it's done through the state agency because it's set up to run these loans. But a CDFI can be a nonprofit organization if they're set up to receive money and then give loans. They can't accept deposits, but it's a certain type of organization that is eligible for Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund money.
Okay. And financing through like credit unions, local credit unions, are traditional financing options like that possible for these projects?
They absolutely are. It's one of the reasons green banks were created is because banks, they are adverse to risk. So sometimes viewed renewable energy projects in the past as risky investments. They don't really have to anymore because of the IRA. So yes, traditional financing is still available and maybe more available to you because they know that you will get direct pay reimbursement, right? So you're a less risky investment when you go to a bank or a credit union like you're talking about.
That makes sense. Okay, I know that we've had a couple questions. Is there any other person listening that wants to come off mute and answer a question or ask a question? Otherwise, I'll keep going down the list of questions that have been called from the Q&A. Okay. We'll keep going through the Q&A. So the next question, so I know that Jillian answered this question in the chat from Sophia, who's in Colorado. Hello, Sophia. But it's important that we talk about this, which is because it's such a big theme of how we build and replicate success from the federal level to the states on these tax credits. So how do we build on this success at the state level for climate, for renters? So in Colorado, Sophia said that they've heard naysayers argue we cannot take this type of direct pay approach to a tax credit at the state level, but she's wondering if folks have ideas to launch a successful legislative campaign and the legal limitations there might be under state tax laws. So Jillian, do you want to answer this question again?
Hi, yeah, sure. It's a great question. And I'll just say that as a little preview, we at Lawyers for Good Government are actually working with some states right now to try and set up some pilot projects that we'll share out as soon as we're able to, because a lot of states are trying to figure this out. How do we maximize what's available under direct pay, what's available under the Inflation Reduction Act generally? And you're right, there could be state limitations depending on the state as to what tax credits they can provide. So that is something that is kind of not, you have to look at an ad hoc basis depending on the state. But it is there are a lot of federal funding programs that could go to a state to try and create a tax rebate option if there aren't other state limitations. Another thing that states can, and we strongly recommend that they do look at, is what projects do they have that are eligible for direct pay? Because states are applicable entities too. So they're like fleet transition is a big one that states and local governments and school districts and others can be considering, where they get upfront grants to do it, and then they can get direct pay for anything extra that they had to pay. So the placement of electric vehicle infrastructure is another great one for states to be considering, that maybe they haven't been able to afford before, but now with direct pay, they can get reimbursed for it. So that's another thing to consider. But really importantly, I think, is also the education piece, that states have in my personal opinion, an obligation really to educate their communities and their local governments and those who are newly eligible for this elective pay. So I think in addition to applying and creating rebate programs, there's an education piece that states can do to help these communities, nonprofits, local governments know that this stuff is out there and they can apply for it. And there is literally at the moment no cap on your reimbursement. If you're eligible, if you've done it correctly, you get your money, as long as the Republicans don't end up clawing that back.
I would just like to preview that the center, along with Lawyers for Good Government, the State Innovation Exchange, and other partners, may or may not be issuing a state level resource guide for state legislators and states very soon. Similarly, we are hoping to put something out in community with CPE, Lawyers for Good Government, and other partners, a financing guide, because even if we're not necessarily working directly with your green bank, we want to help all of you figure out where your credit union is, or your green bank, or whatever it is that's going to be in your community that's going to help you get your project done. And so we're all building this ship as it's flying, but we can't wait to stay in community with you all and continue to provide, hopefully, resources that are very useful in helping you overcome obstacles that stand between you and a finished renewable energy project.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. So I'm noticing some questions in the chat. If you can, I know it's a pain because you just typed it and Zoom can be funny about copying, but if you can, if you're an event participant, if you can rename yourself and then put that question back in the Q&A, because we aren't taking questions over chat. We're taking them over Q&A, and also when you put them in the Q&A function, it makes sure that they're answered and that also they're queued up so that even if we can't answer them here, you will get a follow-up. Whereas if you just put it in the chat, you might not get a follow-up. So sorry to ask you to do that duplicate work, but if you could, it'd be a really big help. So the next question is for Greg. Is Greg still here? Wait, great, Greg is still here. One of our participants asked, with respect to prevailing wages, what can be done about right to work states that are anti-union? And how do eligible entities who care deeply about employing and working with unions actually get around this and be able to live up to their own values?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's such an important question. I will say, first of all, you know, one of the reasons that our unions are so committed to fighting these so-called right to work laws is because even though they don't affect in many ways like the underlying policy, like what we're talking about today, it does create this perception that you can't have unions in states that have so-called right to work laws, or you know, these states can't take advantage of these types of federal funding opportunities that encourage union organizing. So, you know, the underlying policy, right to work laws, don't actually prohibit any kind of any project labor agreements or the payment of prevailing wages. I think that, you know, from a claimant's perspective, I think it's important to note that, you know, the requirements are the requirements. So if a contractor, or sorry, if a claimant doesn't ensure that all of its contractors and subcontractors pay prevailing wages and utilize registered apprenticeship programs, then they just don't get the full tax credit. And in many cases, that's about 24%, I think. For most of the tax credits, it's about 24%. You get a base 6% tax credit, and you get an additional 24% if you follow the labor standards. So if a public body or, you know, some nonprofit doesn't follow all of the labor standards for whatever reason, then they just don't get the full tax credit. And it's important to note that, you know, some states do have bans on public entities requiring project labor agreements, but not all right to work states have PLA bans. So, you know, in many cases, like in Virginia, we're a right to work state, but you know, public bodies can still require project labor agreements. And that will, you know, in many cases ensure and create this this presumption of compliance with the labor standards component of the tax credit requirements.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. So the next question is from Vicky Atkinson. How can small local governments with small staff take advantage of direct pay? Oh, wonderful question. Jillian, can you start off on that question? And if anyone else wants to weigh in after Jillian, please feel free.
Sure. Thank you, Rhiana. That's an awesome question. I love it because there's so much you can do as a local government to start thinking about this right now. Even if you're small, if you are thinking about any clean energy projects whatsoever, start to look at the eligible activities that Katie was talking about, you know, electric vehicle, infrastructure, fleet transition, solar projects, even smaller rooftop solar projects. If it's small enough, you may not, while we want everyone to comply with domestic content and American-made requirements, if you're below 1 megawatt, you may not even need to meet those requirements. And so you wouldn't get something called a domestic content reduction later. So just think about what projects might be eligible, start to think about your timing for them. And then I'll just put in a little teaser that I have to imagine CPCC is going to come up with some things as well, but also Lawyers for Your Government is going to be providing some guidance directly to local governments on how you can apply for those things. So consider what projects are eligible, consider what your tax year will look like, when you would need to file. So look at your like fiscal year for your local government. If you end at December, you have to file. If your project was placed in service in that year, you have to file within 5.5 months. So that would be May 15th. So let's say you end in September, you'll have to do February 15th. So think about those kinds of timing things, talk to your financial officer in your city and try and get together and figure out what projects might be eligible. Talk to your auditor, talk to if you have an accountant for the city, those types of things to get ready. And then follow our advisories. We're happy to share out our legal resources to anybody and everybody who can use them. And I will, there's got to be a link I could provide to you to make sure you get them, but I'll be sure to share them out with Katie to send them out to this listserv to get them. And I will pause there for others to weigh in.
Well, it looks like Jillian is an expert on that. So thank you, Jillian. The next question, so is about pre-filing in service. So there's been a lot of questions about when pre-filing, excuse me, will come out and when entities and orgs should pay attention to it. So could our panelists clarify when they think the form might be out and why it's important? So we'll open this up to anyone who has an answer.
Yeah, I hope this is just very quick. So the IRS has told us later in 2023, most useless kind of time frame ever, there will be a form. So we will make sure that you hear about the form becoming public. But like I said, in the presentation, the first time the entities will have the opportunity to actually fill it out is probably not until early in 2024. So look out for it in January, February of next year. And then the earliest you'll be able to file your taxes is obviously tax day, April 15th. But just like any other tax year, and of course, we're still waiting for IRS rules. So I, reserve the right to amend what I'm about to say, but it's our anticipation that they'll treat it just like they treat any other type of filing. So you can amend your filing, you can file late. There are certain ways that you can go about getting that credit later in the year, but we'll be making sure that folks are paying attention to the process at the appropriate inflection points along the way. And I see Jillian came up on camera, so I'm going to come back to you, Jillian, too. You want to add to that?
I just wanted to add one tiny little piece as a word of warning to folks, just because we do want to encourage this big time. However, we want you to be careful. At the moment, under the proposed rules, you cannot change your election. So if you decide to go with the ITC election versus the PTC election, the way the rules are currently written, you're not allowed to change your election once it's filed. You can ask for an extension, like a 6-month extension. Those are granted, but you cannot amend your return, which is very frustrating and is one of the comments that we made on their proposed rules. So we're really hoping that they fix that. Okay. So I just want folks to keep that in mind. But if you need more time, you can ask for an extension and to make sure you're doing it right.
Can I ask you a question? Like, what if in February I file and I say, hey, IRS, I'm pre-filing, I'm a library and I'm real and I'm not, so give me a pre-registration number. And the project I think I'm going to build is an ITC solar, whatever. But on April 15th, I have to fill out a 990 form, but I'm not quite ready to file for my direct pay election, even if I'm not changing it from ITC to PTC. Will I be able to file an amended? Do we anticipate? And I know we don't have final IRS rules, but do we anticipate being able to file an amended filing later in the year to get the direct pay credit, even if we weren't ready on April 15th?
So I think what you're getting at is the pre-filing certification form portal that you were talking about. And that's where you get your registration ID, which is, I'm totally going to nerd out here, which is when you take your ID and you put it on your tax filing form, which is form 3800 and 990T. But you need to get your registration ID for each applicable property through the pre-filing certification registration. And that portal, like you said, Katie, we anticipate is going to be open sometime later this year. I heard from Treasury they're trying for a month, but I agree with you. That could mean like the end of the year. So anyway, you have to do that. However, caution, I would not recommend that people file their pre-certification registration form until and unless they know that their project date of being in service, which really means since projects get delayed all the time, you don't want to be filing for your pre-certification registration until your project is essentially done or you're really close. So you know when your placed in service date is. But to your point, if even though you thought you were right, you got your placed in service date and didn't end up being the exact right date and you need to amend your pre-certification filing registration, you can go back in and amend that. In fact, you have to go back and fix that if you did it wrong, because they'll go back and check. the thing you can't amend is once you've got that registration ID form done, when you actually file your tax return. And that you can't do until your project is already complete anyway, and it's in service, and you're asking for your, it's called an election, but you're filing a return with the IRS. And so that's the one you can't amend. That's your actual tax returns. Like we're all private folks. We all have to file our tax returns. It's the same idea. However, here you can't file an amended return. I don't know why they did that. We're trying hard to get them to fix that, but that's the way it currently is right now.
And we're going to keep holding everybody's hand, right, Jillian? We're going to keep making sure that all of these questions get answered over the next year or two.
I just sent a copy of my comment letter to someone at Treasury again, just to make sure that they sign.
Amazing. Thank you. And really appreciate that level of detail. Because that's what it's going to take. So we have another question from Megan. I'm going to mess up this last name. Esaheb? Apologies for that being wrong. But hey, Megan, what do you mean by finish the project on time? Is that a requirement? She said construction always gets delayed.
So Jillian, obviously feel free to add more if you want to, but I think this shouldn't take too long for me to explain. For the investment tax credit, your project has to have been placed in service, which means that it's producing electricity, it's been connected up to the grid, and electrons are flowing. So that is placed in service. If it's a production tax credit, the tax credit's actually tied to how much electricity you're producing. So naturally, it has to have been done. You're absolutely right that there are construction delays. And so that was what Jillian and I were sort of trying to get at, which is if you think in 2023, you're going to finish a project, but you don't actually really finish it until 2024, that's okay. And you have to fix your filing. You'll have to file to pre-register again in that next year, but it doesn't really harm the project. Like you'll just be able to fix it on the back end, more or less. And I hear Taylor. There we go.
Taylor, you're muted.
I have like an extra mute button on my headset sometimes. It's very confusing. But if you are working on a project and it's getting towards the end of your tax year and you're like, if we could hurry up, excuse me, construction and finish it in this tax year, or if we didn't do that, it would kind of get into the next tax year. I think that just means you'd want to try to get it done in that tax year because you'll be getting that credit much earlier. Like Katie says, you're not going to be banned from getting the credit or anything like that if it goes into the next year. It's just that the money will be delayed.
Gotcha. Thank you, Taylor. So now we're going to go to the last question. And don't worry if your question was not answered here. Again, the wonderful folks from the CPC Center will follow up and make sure that you get an answer. So no worries if we're not answering it right now. Your question will be answered. So the last question that we're going to be discussing is from Miranda Wilgus. Will energy efficiency type assistance be available for condo associations? Other programs seem only to be for individuals, and a condo association that has capital improvement needs, which makes an excellent opportunity for energy efficiency, is not eligible. So again, she's asking, will energy efficiency type assistance be available for condo associations?
Okay, a condo association in theory is an eligible entity. I would have to just confirm that it's a 501c3 or what type of 501 it is to make sure that it's eligible. But as long as it's not a for-profit, then yes, it itself is eligible. Energy efficiency is a tough nut. There are plenty of provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that provide funding for energy efficiency, but there aren't tax credits that are going to be covered by direct pay the way that we've been discussing so far in this in this program. So we're hoping to put, just like we've been sort of talking about, we're hoping to put out materials that really draw and explain what's going on with energy efficiency and the ways that communities can draw from other types of pots that are available to the same type of entities that we're talking about, these tax exempt entities like schools and hospitals, et cetera.
Awesome. Well, that was our last question. So before we close, just want to echo a couple things. So in chat, Jillian has put a link. So if you have a specific legal question and you want to receive assistance or resources from Lawyers for Good Governance, you can complete the form that she linked there. So just want to let you all know that. And then the last thing to note is that, again, in order to follow up about your question, if you didn't get an answer today, please make sure that you register so that the CPC Center has your email and can follow up. So the link to register is in the chat. So it's already 3:26, so let's go ahead and get ready to close. Just want to thank you all so much for joining us today. Next week, you're going to receive an email with a link to a recording of the presentation portion of the call and a Google Doc full of resources on how you can help build clean, green energy and sound green union jobs in your community. If you got a starting now email and you clicked on a Zoom link, in other words, if your name was participant when you logged on instead of your name, you still need to register to attend the other trainings and to be sure that the center has your email so that they can send you the toolkit and follow up again on any question that you might have that might not have gotten answered. So make sure you sign up so that you can get the toolkit, the presentation, all of the great resources and tools discussed today, and a recording of the webinar. And if you register, you'll also be getting reminders from the CPC Center for future briefings and other resources and tools. So please register. And I think, like Katie mentioned, they will also be sending out notifications, say like when pre-filing is available, about dates and timelines. So if you're going to be, if you're an eligible entity that is interested in participating in direct pay, please make sure to sign up so that you get those alerts. Because following along to see when all this stuff happening is not easy. So please make sure to do that. Again, the link to register is in the chat. Jillian has also put a new link for if you have questions for Lawyers for Good Governance. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for spending some of your time with us, and please take care. And that'll be the last for me. I'll open it up to Katie or any of our other panelists in case they might want to say thank you and goodbye.
Incredibly impressed with your ability to moderate and facilitate back-to-back panels, Rhiana. We're so grateful that you're willing to help us out with this panel today. We're honored to have your help in making sure that this program does what we think it should be doing. And we're very, very grateful for your partnership in that. Thank you similarly to Vice President Moss from NEA and to Greg from the Building Trades in Virginia. We're so thankful for you standing up for workers in the clean energy future that we have envisioned for ourselves. Thank you to our experts who have very diligently answered questions. We've got Jillian Blanchard from Lawyers for Good Government, Advait Anrun from the Center for Public Enterprise, and Taylor Craner from the New York University Law School Tax Center. Hopefully I got all of that out correctly. And we're just extremely grateful that all of you stuck around to ask your questions, to take this information in. And we're really, really grateful to all of you for your time as well. And we're looking forward to providing additional materials and explainers as we get more information from the IRS about this program. And we're grateful and hopeful for everybody's partnership with us in pushing for this program to be everything that it can be. with that, unless anybody has anything else for the good of the order, I think we're really good to adjourn. And so thank you to my colleagues for helping run this call. And hopefully we'll see all of you again very soon.